Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with some historical Mahler that's not what you think. It's very, very interesting. Before about 1960, there weren't a lot of Mahler recordings that were not by, say, Bruno Walter, and there was a Dmitri Metropolis thing here and a Eugene Normandy thing there, and there were some, Horenstein did a thing, and there was the Oscar Freed Resurrection, and there's a very limited Mahlerian discography on major labels. But there were a couple performances that really no one pays much attention to, either now or possibly even then, although I guess there had to be more attention then because there wasn't anything available. But these are, and their neglect is unaccountable in my view, the Mahler Fourth and Das Lied von der Erde with Eduard van Beinum and the Concertgebouw, which was just called the Concertgebouw in those days. It was not called, the Amsterdam Concertgebouw, I guess. But, back in the day, now it's the, official royal whatever Concertgebouw, because it has the patronage of the Dutch royal family. But back then, they were just an orchestra, and a splendid orchestra. Van Beinum, as you know, took over the orchestra after Mengelberg got in trouble for being a Nazi stooge. Now, of course, everyone will jump up and down and say, oh, he wasn't a Nazi stooge. He wasn't a real Nazi. I don't care. He was an idiot, is what he was, politically. And as a result of that, he got tossed out on his butt and spent the rest of his years in Switzerland. And the orchestra obviously needed to find somebody else. And they chose Van Beinum, who was, as it turns out, a splendid conductor. I think he was a much better conductor than Mengelberg, to tell you the truth. Mengelberg, of course, founded the orchestra, and his special qualities, shall we say, involved doing all kinds of contorted and perverse things with tempo as he got older. In his earlier years, he was actually fairly straightforward, but then he became like an egomaniacal psychopath, and that's why people like him. That's why I like him. I mean, he's fun to listen to. He really is, but most of the recordings he made sound just awful. And so, they have to be taken with a healthy dose of indulgence, whereas Van Beinum's recorded career basically starts in the late 40s, after the war, and it ends when he died, which was in the late 50s. He died very suddenly of a heart attack, which is a terrible, terrible shame. He was a musician's musician. He was one of those conductors who did not have a crazy personality. He was a performer, an instrumentalist. He was incredibly humble, and he just conducted beautiful, musical, effortless, natural. In order to enjoy his performances maximally, I think, you need to know something about the music he's conducting so that you can appreciate some of the subtleties he brings to it, because he wasn't demonstrative. He was a lot actually like Bernhard Haitink, who later took over the orchestra from Van Beinum. Well, originally it was a pairing between Joachim and Haitink because they wanted someone Dutch, but they didn't think Haitink was quite good enough yet. So they started with the pair of them, and then Haitink took over. But that's later. We don't have to deal with it. Beinum was a much better conductor than Haitink was, at least Haitink at the beginning of his career. He was just good, just a serious musician. And his Mahler, he did Mahler 4 and Das Lied von der Erde, and two versions of the Songs of a Wayfarer with two different soloists. These are all mono recordings, but they sound very, very good. There's nothing that you need worry about, the fact that they're mono, and they're on Australian Eloquence. Now, Beinum's stuff has been boxed up every which way. There's a big Beinum box on Scribendum. Some of it was on Philips back in the day. It's all out of print now. It's very hard to find this stuff, but there's a good bit of it here on Eloquence. I don't know how much of this is still around. You'll have to sort of dig around and look and see. But my goodness, this is beautiful Mahler. It is exactly the kind of Mahler you would expect from this kind of a musician, the Haitink style, you might call it, of Mahler. That is, it's not demonstrative, but he downplays nothing. It's not inhibited either. It's just effortless. Everything is organic. All the phrases breathe. The orchestra can give its very best. It never drags. It has no dead spots anywhere. It's just marvelously done. It really is. It's terrific. And the Concertgebouw Orchestra in the 50s was still, even then, a remarkable sounding orchestra with a superb woodwind section particularly. It had kind of like a somewhat obstreperous principal trumpet. The orchestra always sort of did. They still did even when Bernstein was conducting them in Mahler's Ninth. So, yeah, okay. And their percussion section was always weird sounding. The timpani were always a little bit sort of soft-edged. And, the tam-tam was one of those, dinner plates that you hit and it goes like that. It wasn't one of these. But you get past all of that very, very quickly. They really, really sound lovely. The only disadvantage that I can see in this Mahler Fourth, which is otherwise it's so perfectly done. I mean, let me just tell you the timings. Now, I know timings don't tell everything. I keep saying this. They don't, right? But sometimes they do. I mean, they don't tell you anything until they tell you everything, right? It's just like the ideal Mahler Fourth. It's 53 minutes long. It's 15 minutes for the first movement, 8 minutes and a bit for the scherzo, 20 minutes for the adagio, and eight almost just a few seconds short of 9 minutes for the finale. I mean, that is just about perfect. Yes, you can get away with doing it much slower. Yes, you can even do it a little more quickly. But what fascinates me is that this Mahler Fourth was really, really disregarded. Why? Because you had the Mengelberg in appallingly awful sound. But the Mengelberg conducted it with Mahler. And he supposedly wrote down everything Mahler did so that he could duplicate that, which of course is nonsense. If you believe that, you're on drugs. And then he turned in this absolutely wackadoo performance where he's speeding up and slowing down and pulling the music apart like taffy. And it's completely demented. It's fun. It's fun to listen to. It's like a Stokowski, recording. It's crazy, but it's fun. Is it what Mahler actually did? Don't believe it for a second. But they did do that wonderful concert in Holland where Mahler conducted the fourth in the first half, and then he sat down for the second half, and Mengelberg conducted it on the second half. I mean, those were the days, right? Boy, I wish I could have been there, don't you? That would have been great. Anyway, so there was the Mengelberg, which is, in, like I said, wretched sound, but it has those unique qualities. And then there's Bruno Walter, who also had a mono Mahler Fourth, which was somewhat fallibly played, but, basically quite good. And similar to this in its sort of natural, uncrazy ambience. It wasn't decadent. It was fresh. It was lively. It was really in tune with the music's Schubertian roots, its roots in the Viennese classical style, because it is a neoclassical work after all. And so, those were the performances that everybody triangulated their vision of Mahler's Fourth around. And so Beinum was kind of, he was there, but no one was paying much attention. Well, you really should, because boy, do they sound good. And not only do they sound good, but it's very interesting to compare this Mahler Fourth to the first Schulte, which was also made with the Concertgebouw, and which is not anything like as good as this one, either as an interpretation or, interestingly, sonically in some respects. It's a Decca recording, a Decca stereo, but this mono one I think sounds quite a bit better. It's really a fine Mahler Fourth. The only thing I have to say against it is Margaret Ritchie, who is the soprano in the finale. She's just not very good. I mean, she has sort of odd pronunciation, and she sounds like she's always lagging behind the beat when the music picks up, in the Wayfarer in ein englisches Leben, she's singing that stuff, and she's like, the orchestra wants to move along, and Beinum is doing his best to support her, but she's just weighing the proceedings down a little bit. And as a result, it takes some of the magic away from that finale. But that's not Beinum's fault. He was stuck with her, and there you go. But it's a Mahler 4 you should hear. For its period, its time period, it was recorded in 52, I think. Let me see here. I have the date. They do give you the date. Here is the date. The date was, John Colshaw was the producer. Look at that. And the recording locations were, let's see, was John Colshaw with Symphony No. 4? Yeah, amazing. 1952, that is correct. And it's really, really cool. So that's that performance. Now, in the first Songs of a Wayfarer, because there are two, the soprano is one Eugenia Zareska. Now, I have no clue who she was, and she sounds so terrible, I could not be bothered to look her up. There were not, I guess, so many singers out there doing Mahler's Songs of a Wayfarer back in the day, and this was in 1948, and she did it, and I give her credit for doing it. But her voice is completely unmemorable, and her delivery all on the same level, basically. And even Beinum doesn't sound too enchanted by her. The performance is a little droopy compared to the next one that we're going to hear, which is infinitely better. So the other thing on the disc here is Das Lied von der Erde. And it's a wonderful Das Lied von der Erde. Just hands down excellent all the way around. The playing is gorgeous. The conducting is fantastic. Again, it just has this wonderful sense of flow. And yes, you know what they are. The woodwind playing is absolutely exquisite, and the soloists are terrific. The soloists are a very young, this is 1957, Ernst Haefliger, who would go on to do it like 150 other times. He did it for Bruno Walter, he did it for Eugen Joachim. He was the Das Lied von der Erde guy, when Fritz Wunderlich wasn't around, or Julius Patzak, who did it with Bruno Walter in the Vienna Philharmonic. And again, it's very interesting to compare this Das Lied von der Erde to the Bruno Walter Vienna Philharmonic one with Kathleen Ferrier and Julius Patzak. This one is so much better. It's better playing. It's better singing. Everything about it. And Nan Merriman, who was the alto, Nan Merriman was a very good singer, and she was a concert singer, and she did some opera too, but she really had a characterful delivery and a way with words that really makes you pay attention to them. She was the un-Kathleen Ferrier, and I love her for that reason. Her voice was not dark. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't that she was not a hooty English oratorio contralto. Her voice was open and it was fresh, but it was just in the right range, the mezzo range. And her singing is lovely throughout Das Lied von der Erde, and it's even lovelier in the Songs of a Wayfarer, or just as lovely in the Songs of a Wayfarer, which, as I said, is notably livelier. It's very funny. You compare the second song, Ging heut Morgen übers Feld, over the fields I went at morning, the principal theme of the first movement of the Fourth Symphony, which is where that came from. And the first one is like, chink, 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 heut Morgen übers Feld. But then with Merriman, everybody wakes up. It's, yeah, bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, ba. It's exactly, it's a world of difference. And the sonics are very good. Very good. You don't even notice that it's mono. I mean, it sounds terrific. So, if you're a Mahler collector, and you may not be familiar with these, they've been around forever. They've been buzzing around forever. The first Songs of a Wayfarer, by the way, is with the London Philharmonic. Which was also no Concertgebouw. Let's not kid ourselves. So that was another issue that you might want to take note of when you're making the comparisons. But otherwise, my goodness, this is good stuff. I mean, Beinum's reputation was basically made. He did some fabulous Debussy. He was an amazing Brahms conductor, and also an excellent Bruckner conductor. I mean, he did all of that repertoire, and he was very well recorded. I mean, the big Scribendum Beinum box has, 30 some odd discs. There's plenty of stuff to listen to that he did. He was quite busy in the recording studio. So he's worth getting to know. And this is all we have of him in Mahler. And I just can't imagine anybody who cares about Mahler not wanting to hear these performances. They really show you what was going on at the time, and they make such fantastically interesting comparisons to the more famous performances that were available at the same time. And there weren't many, so the comparisons are easy to make. So keep on listening, folks. Thanks for joining me. Take care.